My name is Trey Malone. I'm the Bulgy Chair for Managerial Economics and Agribusiness here at Purdue University. So it's important to remember that the average egg price that we expect to spend at the grocery store is about $2 a dozen. Now, as of this week, egg prices are sitting at about $4.90 a dozen, so that feels very elevated. But believe it or not, that's actually significantly lower than what the prices were last week. So the important thing to remember here is that while prices are elevated, the volatility in the change in prices is really unprecedented. Consumers should expect volatility. I would anticipate that we're still going to see elevated egg prices. We've had some fairly robust plans put forward from the federal government to try to mitigate some of this price volatility. But in general, I would anticipate seeing more of this volatility as we move forward throughout the year. So we need to remember that the egg industry is extremely talented at predicting demand. It's not like they forgot that Easter season is coming, right? So what can happen is usually they plan ahead and they develop some type of layer flock system that prevents that nasty spike in egg prices. Now this year, because we've had such a dramatic influence of the avian influenza in terms of the supply of eggs, it's not unlikely to assume that we'll see an increase in egg prices due to the Easter season. So the avian influenza has eliminated more than 160 million birds in the United States over the last few years. This is something that kind of comes seasonally at this point. So every year we've seen a new wave of the avian influenza. Keep in mind that to grow an egg, we have to have a flock that usually takes about 6 months to develop. And so as we eliminate these birds, it takes 6 months to replace those layers, which can create these really nasty supply chain bottlenecks as we develop our egg supply here in the United States. So one thing that I do think that consumers can really take advantage of in this moment is creativity. So we typically assume that eggs have to go into all of these different pies and buckets and products. But sometimes it's possible to actually shift some of that demand. Now, the other thing that I think consumers should remember is that there is a massive income inequality when it comes to eggs. So for example, we recently just released an article that demonstrates that the total consumer of the United States egg pool lost more than $1 billion in total surplus from the market. Now, that hurts the higher income consumers, but it really hits the pocketbooks of the lower income consumers. So as we move through this type of price volatility, I would be paying more and more attention to how the lower income consumers are experiencing that loss. So we can all remember during COVID-19, we saw this explosion of egg prices at that moment in time too. Now that was true for shell egg, but it wasn't necessarily true for all eggs. Believe it or not, there were actually certain types of eggs that you could buy at cheaper than bottled water during COVID-19. Now the reason I bring that up is because in the current environment, we have very rigid supply chains set up for the packaging, set up for the transportation, set up for the purchasing of eggs depending on what grocery store you're in. So that's why if you go to Target, you might see a different supply than if you go to Walmart or Kroger or fill in the blank grocery store. These are all very unique supply chains for every single sector and every single grocer within that sector. So while it's true that eggs typically are considered a commodity, the supply chain itself can actually be fairly rigid for the product that we're selling.